Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Austrian Grand Prix weekend here on the BBC. Thank you very much for joining us. This is it'll be the halfway point of the season after this race. This is round 11 of 22 in the season's Formula One World Championship. I'm Jack Nicholls. I have Mark Priestley, the former McLaren mechanic, and Andrew Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer, alongside me here in commentary, and looking forward to what should be an interesting weekend off the back of, I nearly said one of the greatest races in F1 history. That felt like it was going to be a bit over the top, but is that a bit over the top? Well, it's not bad.
You're not the first person to have said it.
Really?
I'm not sure I agree with that, personally. I think.
Are we talking top 20?
Oh, yeah, I'd say.
Maybe
it's
top 20, yeah.
Yeah, and that's still a big thing, right? I mean, I thought it was a great race. It's sort of exactly what we wanted from the 22 regulations, and that was sort of the first time we really got it over a course of an entire Grand Prix. So way too early to say, yes, wonderful, the 2022 regulations have done the trick. We're not at that stage, but it was a nice thing to be a part of, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Max Verstappen still leads the championship despite finishing 7th in Silverstone. 181 points for him. Sergio Perez is still second in the championship on 147 points. Then Charles Leclerc third in the standings on 138. And then Carlos Sainz fourth after taking the win. 127 points for the Spaniard. Reasonable performance again from Mercedes. 2 podiums in a row for Hamilton, third and third, which is positive for them. Hamilton also getting the fastest lap of the race, but it's going to be interesting to see what we uncover in Austria and who it suits, because historically, over the last few years at least, it's very much been a Red Bull circuit, but that was in older cars when Ferrari weren't necessarily competitive.
Whereas in the new cars, I'd say it's absolutely a Red Bull circuit.
Oh, really? Okay. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a nice weekend.
I mean, it kind of looks that way, doesn't it? I mean, there's no, this season so far has told us there is no way we can predict with any accuracy what's going to happen, because as they always say in Formula One, anything can happen, and it often does. But look, this is a circuit that's high speed. It's got 3 DRS zones, long straights, and a little twisty bit in the middle. It is a Red Bull circuit. If you look at it on paper, it's Max Verstappen loves going there. This is a circuit that can be quite tough on engines. That's not going to suit Ferrari either. I'm not suggesting they're going to have problems, but we know they've had them so far, and they haven't really got a proper fix in place for them. So, look, I think it's a circuit where overtaking is possible, so qualifying and the way we form a grid this weekend, of course a sprint weekend, but the way the grid is formed doesn't necessarily determine the race outcome, and that is something to really hold on to as a positive, I would say.
A pleasant day in Austria, only 17 degrees the air temperature. Sometimes coming to Austria in the summer and it is unbearable. I came once for a Formula 2 race back in must have been 10 or 11, and it was 37 degrees or something. Absolute farce it was, but only 17 degrees today. Track temperature 38. There was rain yesterday as well. Andrew Benson, BBC's chief F1 writer, what are you looking at this weekend? What are you looking for? What are you anticipating seeing?
I'm less pessimistic than Mark about the competitive picture.
When Andrew's the less pessimistic one,
Although I would say that Red Bull have made a couple of upgrades in the last couple of races, and there have been signs that they've really taken them forward. And I mean, Verstappen, Silverstone was a hard race to read because it was wet a lot of the time through practice and qualifying. And then, of course, Verstappen only did 12 laps of the race, and he spent that behind Carlos Sainz, pressured him into a mistake. But there were points during the weekend where Verstappen looked really, really ominously fast. And the same applied in Canada, actually. It's going to be... I'm interested to see how those Red Bull upgrades go, because it is slightly concerning for me that they may have made a step forward and Ferrari haven't made as big a one. Having said that, I don't see this as necessarily more of a Red Bull circuit versus Ferrari than any others. They've been so close this year. What we don't have an answer to at the moment is that Red Bull's strength at the Red Bull Ring in recent years has been all to do with the way the engine works, the way the turbocharger works at altitude. Or turbocharger and compressor, I should say. It's because the combination of the two and how that all combines with the engine. But that was then. And this is now. All the engines are different again this year, including the Ferrari one. So we don't know at the moment how the engines are going to compare at altitude. So we've still got to wait and see. And the other thing to bear in mind is that I think Charles Leclerc has been obviously the outstanding qualifier of the year. Is it 6 poles he's had in 9 races, and he didn't fight for one of them because he had an engine penalty. So I think Leclerc is Leclerc. He's going to take some beating, whatever. So, but the Red Bull's still the strongest car in race trim, it would appear at the moment.
I'm certainly not saying, by the way, that it's going to be a Red Bull walkover, so don't not switch on your radio over the rest of the weekend to join this, because I do think it will be close, but I just think that it's all pointing towards Red Bull having an opportunity here.
Yeah, so Alex Albon has made his way out onto the circuit. In fact, quite a few cars making their way onto the circuit. Albon, Stroll, Alonso, Norris, Joe, Gasly, Verstappen, Russell, Ocon, Ricciardo. Leclerc has just left the pits now in the Ferrari. Carlos Sainz following him out, the previous race winner, and he is making his way onto the circuit. Hamilton, Tsunoda, everybody very keen to get straight out there, actually, as they come down into the right-hander of the hairpin, which is turn 3, after they renamed it a few years ago from turn 2. It's now turn 3, and then the run down towards turn 4, the downhill right-hander with the gravel trap on the outside, where we see so much incident over the years. That sort of turns 3 and 4 sequence always provides some entertainment. Then into the 2 quick left-handers, Rint and Lauda, which is turns 6 and 7, and then down into turns 9 and 10, the final 2 quick right-handers on the circuit. Very short lap, both in terms of distance and in terms of lap time, and Max Verstappen is seeing all of the grandstands around him engulfed in orange flares, because this has always been a huge Verstappen sort of fan circuit, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I was actually in the Netherlands yesterday at an event talking to a lot of Max Verstappen fans, many of which who are making the drive from Holland down into Austria overnight to be at this event, all with their orange T-shirts and jumpers ready to go. So, yeah, this is as close to a home race as I guess you'll get, other than Zandvoort. So, a lot of big support here. Home race, of course, for the team as well. You know, as I said before, I think this is an opportunity that Red Bull have at their disposal. They still have to get everything right. It is so close, as Andrew says. There's not a lot between any of those top couple of, there's top 4 cars, really, top 4 drivers. Not much between them in terms of performance. It's about who gets it right over the course of the entire weekend. I mean, the last time out at Silverstone, we saw Ferrari perhaps miss out on an opportunity where they had the pace but just didn't quite get everything perfectly right, and that's often the way it is in Formula 1. You've got to tick every single box if you want to maximise your weekend.
Wow, maybe I'm being foolish here. I'm sure a lot of you at home rolling your eyes, but hashtag BBC F1 or F1 at bbc.co.uk if you want to get in touch and help me out. I know it's the Red Bull Ring, but why is it so Verstappen mad? I've just looked at it. It's miles from the Netherlands.
I've just looked at that map you've pulled up and questioned my own geography there. Yeah, right.
It's miles
there
from the Netherlands.
There were a lot of people jumping in cars last night from Eindhoven, heading their way down down to the Red Bull Ring. So it is a long way. But
I get. Spa, completely get. But
that's the passion of Max Verstappen fans for you.
Well, if you think about it, Jack, what other choices are there?
Well, I guess Germany's gone.
Germany's gone. France is also an awfully long way. So is Monaco, and Hungary's even further than Austria. And there's a load of them in Hungary as well. So
Monza must be as close.
Yeah,
Monza must be as close. Silverstone must be as close.
Any Max Verstappen fans listening?
Yeah, exactly. Why don't they make an orange grandstand at Silverstone? Silverstone would pop off if that was. You had one grandstand just full of orange Max Verstappen fans.
I got limp home mode.
Understood, stand by.
So Lando Norris has ended up in limp home mode.
I had that on my own car last week. It's an absolute nightmare.
Really?
Yeah. I know how he feels.
It's 10.5 hours to drive Eindhoven to Austria. It's 10 hours 20. It's 15 minutes quicker to go to Monza. So you got to be going to Monza of the 2 choices for me.
Right, let's put that one to bed.
Yeah, exactly. Done. A few cars out on track, as I say. Only, Albon's returned to the pits, so have Stroll and Vettel. That is all. Everybody else is on circuit. Verstappen has done a 1 minute 8.656. He's 7/10 quicker than Ocon. Everybody has gone out on the medium tyres. Andrew?
What I would say about Monza versus the Red Bull Ring, if you're Dutch, is that if you're camping or caravanning or whatever, or mobile homing, and we know that the Dutch as a nation are very fond of said activities,
Yeah.
I would say Monza is not the best choice.
No, that's
whereas
true.
the Rebel Ring really is. There's lots more camping there, so
Yeah.
maybe that's why.
It's a real camping-y vibe, isn't it? So you're just hearing Sergio Perez in having a big lock-up on the right front and then skip through the gravel trap on the exit of turn 4. He's done a decent flat spot actually on that on those medium Pirellis and then into the gravel, and that was
he
the
coasted all the way in. It sounded like he was off the throttle and coasting all the way down to the corner like it wouldn't stop.
very strange. And that was the corner where Perez and Norris had their comings together last year, and the various controversies that entailed. Alonso now goes to the top of the times, a 1 minute 8.203 for the Alpine driver, 2 tenths ahead of Kevin Magnussen. Perez is now 4th, but then Verstappen goes quickest again, a 1 minute 7.720 for Verstappen as he comes out of the final corner and across the line. Hamilton out on a lap as well, but that Verstappen lap time almost half a second clear of Fernando Alonso, as again you would expect in these early stages, as Verstappen now backs off. As I say, Albon, Stroll and Vettel, the only 3 drivers in the pits. Norris has continued, so whatever that limp home mode was appears to have been fixed by McLaren and getting back on his way. Mark, we had quite a big discussion yesterday on the preview podcast, which you can still listen to on the BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts. What did you make of Ferrari's strategy calls in Silverstone?
Less than perfect, I'd describe it as. I mean, I actually listened to the podcast that you guys did yesterday. Thought it was very good.
Thank you very much.
I agreed with Jolyon's views that, Jolyon was talking about, is it something more than just the decision-making on the day? Is it more about the culture of the team and the organisation? And I firmly believe it is. I've had a number of former colleagues and friends that have gone on to work at Ferrari. I've had some real insight into what it's like behind the walls at Maranello. And I mean, albeit that was a few years ago, I still think we're seeing signs of the fact that it's very difficult for people at the racetrack to make quick decisions, and it feels like they're under so much pressure when they're making those decisions, more pressure than just the regular pressure that comes with being part of a Formula One team. The pressure inside Ferrari seems even greater, so there's a fear of getting those decisions wrong, and I think when you have that, you hesitate, you have indecision, and it's that indecision that I think we saw last weekend that probably cost them a better result than the one that they got.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you always wait for it to. That's the thing for me. We always wait for it to get better, and that indecision to stop happening. But it just hasn't for a decade almost now.
I think what's interesting as well is that the 2 big errors that they've made in the course of this season are opposite errors. So in Monaco, they went for something that they didn't need to go for. You know, the switch to intermediate tyres with Leclerc. They could have, when Perez was coming up behind him. Leclerc was leading. They just leave him out on the wets, change to slicks like Sainz told them to do with him.
Yeah.
Whereas in Silverstone, they didn't make the decision. It was the completely opposite way round. You know, they didn't make the decision to let Leclerc pass Sainz to see if he could go quicker, which it looked like he could. Although, by the way, Sainz was saying yesterday that when he was behind Leclerc, he didn't realise until then how much of a gain you got from the slipstream and the DRS. So
He would say that, wouldn't he?
He would say that, wouldn't he? But anyway, and also Leclerc had a damaged front wing, and also the safety car. Again, they erred on the side of caution. Same decision. You know, why? You know, they didn't. Both things were a not decision moment, whereas Monaco was a decision moment, and they got each one the wrong way around.
But can I give you an analogy that I think is sort of relevant here? If you're, when you were at school and you were so young and you were like lacking in confidence amongst a bigger group, and someone decides they want to do something that you don't necessarily 100% agree with, are you brave enough to stand up in that moment and say, look, that's the wrong call, or I think we should be doing this? Or do you just go along with the crowd because you haven't got any confidence? You know, you're worried about what the crowd will do if you make a different decision to the popular one. And it almost feels like that's what happens inside Ferrari. No one's free enough or willing enough to stand up and make a confident call that might be different to the one that someone else might already have made, because they fear this massive risk or this massive failure that might come off the back of it.
Is it the wind, or the car is moving a lot even in the straights? Like,
very high wind confirmed. We're checking everything else.
So a lot of wind for Pierre Gasly. The car's moving a lot, even in the straights. So, and they're the team saying, yeah, it's pretty windy out there. Verstappen's still quickest on that 1:07.7 that he did 5 minutes or so ago. For those of you wanting a sync, we've got 49 minutes and 50 seconds left on the clock. Gasly is now coming up the hill and makes his way past one of the Alfa Romeos and then gets onto the brakes into turn 3 up at the top. Nullapak says, does Andrew have a secret fast route to Monza like he does to Spa?
I'm afraid not, no.
No fast route to Monza?
I mean, you fly to Linate, you get in your hire car and you drive, half an hour from Linate to Monza, don't you? That's the route.
I never get to do Linate.
How come?
We always have to go like Malpensa or something.
Malpensa's a real pain, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, but the flights are cheaper.
Are they?
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm doing Linate this year.
I don't know this year.
Also, the hire car park in Malpensa is impossible to find.
Niche Italian airport chat here on... what's your favourite Italian airport? You know the one...
Rome is my favourite. I've been to Rome twice this year already.
What, Fiumicino?
Yeah, and it's fantastic. Really good.
I've never flown into... What was it? Ciampino? The other one. I've never flown into that one.
Me neither.
But Fiumicino's nice.
Yeah.
This is amazing stuff, guys.
I do like Bologna. Bologna's really convenient for hire cars. You just walk out and it's just right there. Bologna's a good one.
Meanwhile, Max Verstappen's quickest.
Yeah.
So far.
Well, I'd already said that, and he's been quickest for 10 minutes. I don't need to say it again, do I? But he is a 1:07.7. Alonso, Magnussen, Perez, Bottas, the top 5. Hashtag BBC F1, your favourite European airports. Ocon, Leclerc, Schumacher, Joe, and Gasly, the rest of the top 10. And then it's Sainz, Russell, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, the top 15. Norris, Albon, Latifi, Vettel, and Stroll, the 20 drivers. Vettel is back out, and actually Stroll has just left the pits now, so he is back on the track. So it's only Fernando Alonso in the pits. On Mercedes, and I don't know whether this is, but this is quite a curb aggressive-y place, isn't it? Which traditionally, if we look at Montreal in particular, has not been good for the Mercedes. But it's a very different kind of curb usage here, isn't it? Like here, you're sort of running wide on the curbs on the exit rather than using them through the corners, like at the chicanes.
Like Montreal.
Like Montreal.
Yeah, so they always expected to go well at Silverstone because there's almost no slow corners. Slow corners is their big weakness. And the bumps. So they always thought Silverstone would be good. Jim Ricciardo's having a sort of oscillating DRS flap as he's driving around in first practice right now. Something for McLaren to get on top of. They're less confident about this weekend because there are quick corners in Austria, but there are also 3 slow corners where they won't be competitive. So they don't think it's going to be as good a race for them. Paul Ricard in a couple of weeks' time, they're optimistic about. Hungary, they're very worried about because it's all slow corners and a bit bumpy as well. But I think the big picture stuff to get across about Mercedes is that the Silverstone upgrade has given them quite a lot of confidence. They feel internally they refer to it as like the layers of an onion. They peel off one layer of an onion, they discover a whole load of new problems that they didn't know were there because they were dealing with the first layer of problems. And Silverstone was another layer that came off, and they now feel that they're in a place where they can, where they understand the car, they're operating the car differently, they've set it up differently from what they were doing earlier in the season with the 2 upgrades they had in Spain and then the one in Silverstone, and they feel that now they can start putting performance on it, and they're relatively optimistic. As Hamilton was saying yesterday, he said he has absolute faith that he can win a race later this year. They believe they now have the confidence to think that towards the end of the year they'll be absolutely competitive, which is not something Hiss on radio.
Can we have HPP 9 set position 1, Max on 1, now 3 seconds.
That was a lot of information and I didn't understand what you just said. I didn't understand what you said, mate. What you said about the switch?
HPP 9 set position 1.
That wasn't Bono.
Engine settings, no, it must be his engine engineer, yeah. Anyway, just to finish
Hamilton's
that point.
radio, by the way.
They're optimistic that they can now move forward, and so I think that also underlines that there's been a lot of conversation about the Mercedes side pod concept because it's so different from everybody else. They're saying, well, it's not necessarily, all the things that make the performance difference this year are things you can't see. They're all under the floor. So I'm getting the impression, although I wouldn't want to commit one way or the other, I'm getting the impression they don't necessarily feel they need to adopt a sort of wide, tunnelled Red Bull or Ferrari type side pod option for next year. They think that they can probably carry on with this concept if they choose to.
Interesting, very interesting. Across the line comes Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. He goes 7th quickest now, 1.1 seconds slower than Max Verstappen's lap time. Hamilton is just coming around the middle sector. He's a second down on Verstappen after that middle sector. Old Man Yells at Cloud says, why are we wondering why fans at the Red Bull Ring are supporting the lead Red Bull driver? Well, the Red Bull Ring is basically just a sort of sponsorship name, you know what I mean? It's not like, I mean, it's an ownership thing as well, but... And all the fans are Dutch. I think it's not the local Austrians that have come along to support Red Bull and therefore the lead Red Bull driver. It is the Dutch fans that have come down. Howard says he's done a couple of morning tours between Holland and Austria, and you see loads of Dutch people. They like the south of Germany and Austria as holiday destinations anyway.
There you go.
Reportedly, according to Howard. I believe Howard, but that adds a little bit.
Well, I can verify that later this year if you like, because I'm going on holiday to southern Germany.
Are you?
Yeah.
Really? Is that Bavaria, southern Germany?
Yeah.
What airport?
Munich, obviously.
Okay. Well, let us know how it is.
Over the Spa weekend as to how Munich airport is, if everyone's interested. Which I doubt they are, to be honest. Mark's clearly not.
Kaylee says, Harry was great, but this is the chat we tune in for. So, yeah, absolutely. I came back to a lovely email, actually, this morning from Martin saying, well done, Harry. Great commentating. So much better than Nichols. So, thank you very much, Martin, for that. That really made my morning. Right. 42 minutes left on the clock. Well, just under 43. Leclerc's on a quicker lap this time. He's in the middle sector now. And he has gone about 3/10 slower than Verstappen in Sector 1, about 4/10 slower than Verstappen in Sector 2. Verstappen's in a bit of a league of his own at the moment. He's coming now into the final 2 corners, Charles Leclerc. Throws it into the quick right-hander of Turn 9, then the sort of slightly slower but still pretty quick right-hander of Turn 10, out across the line, and he gets ahead of Alonso and up into 2nd place, but is half a second adrift of Max Verstappen. So Verstappen quickest, Leclerc 2nd, half a second between them. None of these lap times particularly relevant at the moment. The McLaren's down in 17th and 18th as it stands. Sainz in the other Ferrari is on a lap. He is about a 10th down on Leclerc after the first 2 sectors. He's coming through that avenue of trees now that takes him out onto the final 2 turns, out across the line. And Carlos Sainz, does he jump up from 7th? He does. He goes to 4th, but 9/10 of a second away from Max Verstappen. So everybody doing the same tyre strategy. Everybody's out on the mediums, just pounding round, don't know the fuel loads. Vettel now suddenly goes 4th quickest in the Aston Martin, and they're a team actually that have had a shocker of a couple of weekends, mainly because of wet qualifyings. But yeah, Verstappen, Leclerc, Alonso, Vettel, Sainz, the top 5.
It's important to note, of course, given that it's a sprint weekend, this is their only sort of opportunity to fettle the car, to fine-tune the setup, to try things before Parc Fermé kicks in this afternoon ahead of the Friday qualifying session. So this is an even more important session, or a way more important session than it normally is, which is why you're seeing everybody out on track, trying to get as many laps in as possible. As Jack just said, everyone on the medium tyre at this stage, looking ahead to the sort of the Grand Prix and the longer runs, I guess, to some extent. And then we'll start to get a switch over to that softer tyre that everyone's going to use for the qualifying session. So these are all key laps. This is not a normal Friday morning FP1 session that's almost inconsequential to some extent. This is the one that matters, and in fact the only one that really matters before things get real this afternoon.
Absolutely. Yellow flag in the middle of the track somewhere.
How are we doing with time? Because we need to go in the other direction with the car.
Yeah, let's box this lap. Get some setup changes.
So that's Sergio Perez saying, how are we doing for time? I.e., how long left in the session? Because we need to make some changes. Or go the other direction. So maybe he and Verstappen starting in different directions. Still not seen what the yellow flag's for yet in the middle sector. Oh, it's for Norris. Norris has broken down in the McLaren on the run into the left-handers at 6 and 7. So he's broken down on the exit of 4, and the red flag is out. Red flag flown in Austria because Lando Norris, whose car went into limp home mode at the start of the session, then they managed to get it going again, is now out. So this will be about a 5 or 6 minute delay, I would have thought, while we clear Norris's car.
And for all the reasons that I just said, this is an important session. That's the very last thing that a team needs. You know, Lando Norris, that will be an even bigger blow than normal, of course, because they may not get that car back now, which means they've done everything they can do before qualifying, and Parc Fermé kicks in. Of course, once Parc Fermé is locked in, the hardware of the car, the settings of the car, bar a few minor changes, are then fixed for the remainder pretty much of the weekend. So that is a real blow.
If you're on fire and need to stop, do it.
I'm smoking from under my seat, mate, so I'd rather get out, all right?
Okay, get out then. Get out, mate.
So that's Norris saying there's fire coming from under me, so I wouldn't mind getting out of this vehicle. And the team saying, yeah, okay, fine. That seems
permission granted.
Yeah, exactly. That seems a reasonable decision to make. And so Norris hops out of his car, and the McLaren is pulled over at the side of the road. McLaren recently? I'm just trying to think. Has anything really happened with McLaren over the last few races? Not really. Ricciardo hasn't scored in Canada or Silverstone. Norris was 6th in Silverstone. He kind of was a little bit in that sort of squabble at the end, but only really due to the safety car. He was at the back of it, but he was in. You could see him.
Yeah. He's been solid, Norris, and Ricciardo, on the other hand, hasn't. And there's still lots of questions revolving around Daniel Ricciardo. He's still being asked about why he's off the pace all the time. He still doesn't have any answers for it, and I can tell you that behind closed doors, McLaren are concerned. I won't go any further than that, but they are concerned, as you would expect.
But he has been better, hasn't he?
Well, he had been until Silverstone, when he was about a second lap off the pace in the race.
And they're also in a fairly tight battle, aren't they, as the best of the rest, behind the front three, if you like, with Alpine. They're in quite a tight battle with Alpine, and yet they've only got one guy bringing home points, and you can't have that as an operation. Alpine have been inconsistent, but at least they have been sort of equally inconsistent with both cars. So when they've had a strong weekend, typically it's both drivers that are able to bring home a decent-ish result, whereas McLaren haven't got that. So you can't operate like that as a Formula One team, and much as I think many people love Daniel Ricciardo, would love to see Daniel Ricciardo performing to the level that we know he can, and certainly performing to a level that McLaren need him to. At the moment he's not, and I don't know how long he can go on like that.
MC says Munich is a good airport. You're lucky to hear.
I mean, no airport's that good at the moment, is it? It's just flying is not quite an unpleasant experience right now. But
yeah, that's a fair point. I'm just trying to think what my favourite airport in the world is. I don't know. That's a bit of a. I'll think about it and get back to you.
I like Haneda in Tokyo. They have really good food there.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Our producer likes Doha, but Doha's not for me.
I like Doha.
Oh, come on. It's just
It's got a swimming pool. It's got a swimming pool.
Have you swum in it?
No, but Karun Chandok has, because I met him at an airport once and he got pissed off for a swim. That's what are you talking about?
Well,
it's a swimming pool.
If Karun Chandok has swum somewhere, it's somewhere I want to be.
I'll tell you as
Read
well,
into that what you will.
Bangkok Airport has a fantastic Thai restaurant in the hotel attached to it, which is well worth going to.
Really? What? You can get Thai food in Bangkok?
Yeah, I know, but if you're hanging around for a flight, that's not always a good option at an airport, is it, food? But there, it really is.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Red flag is out. The order at the moment is Verstappen, Leclerc, Alonso, Perez, Vettel, the top 5. Sainz, Ocon, Magnussen, Hamilton, Russell, the top 10. Bottas, Stroll, Schumacher, Gasly, Zhou, the top 15. Albon, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, Norris and Latifi, the 20 drivers. Norris had done the most laps of anyone with... scratch that. Gasly and Zhou had done more, but he'd done a lot of laps, Norris. 14 laps before he came to a halt. So was getting plenty of running in. 2.4 seconds off Verstappen's pace. So they were obviously on very different strategies at that particular point in time. Red flag still out. So it's been about 5 minutes now, and it's actually come at a reasonably convenient time, I would suggest, because we were about at in fact, Sergio Perez had literally just said, is it time to come in and make setup changes? And they were like, yeah.
That's right, and it does give, it's convenient for everybody apart from Lando Norris, of course. It's really inconvenient for. But yeah, you're right, because they've done a substantial amount of running. They've got an idea. We heard Perez talking about let's go the other direction with setup. First of all, it's not uncommon, particularly on a sprint weekend, when you have only got this one practice session, to split the directions that your cars and your drivers go in terms of setup. So you'll send one out on one particular setup, you'll go a different direction with the other. By about this time in the session, you'll have a very clear idea if one is stronger than the other, and that's what seems like has happened at Red Bull. So it now gives them the opportunity, without the time pressure they would have otherwise had, to come in, make those changes, get the car prepared in the direction they think is best, and then they go out for the second half of the session and have a proper good go at it. So yeah, convenient to some extent. A couple of challenges around this particular circuit that I thought we should mention. One is the fact that, because as you said, Jack, it's a very short circuit, so traffic can be a real issue, particularly around qualifying. There's just not enough space. There's physically not enough tarmac to get everybody on in a clear gap. And the other, everybody bear in mind, spare a thought for the poor guy who has to hand out or hold out the pit board at this circuit, because you only get around 65 seconds to change all your numbers, figure out where your driver is, what the gaps are, replace them back onto the board and hang it out again before your driver's back round. So I always sort of spare a thought for those guys on this weekend.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, that's really. I hadn't really thought about that. That's quite remarkable. What in modern times? What information do you put on a pit? Right, because in the olden days, you basically were giving the information that was a lap old. Right? Yeah. Because the driver would come across the line, he'd be 2.4 seconds behind someone. At the end of that lap, you would tell him. Yeah. The gap that it was
and it was their only way of getting that information.
Exactly, and
that's
so that was
exactly
fine.
what happens still.
It's still a lap ago, the gap.
But it's also...
Because it can't be the current lap, because you can't put it on the board to hang out with the driver.
It's not a lap ago, it's like 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, so is it do they take the second sector delta or the...
But it's also very dependent on what a driver wants. I mean, I've worked with a number of drivers and they all want different things. Some don't actually care at all if you'd never handed it out, because they don't look at it. But others just it's a little comfort blanket.
Who loved
for
it
some.
the most?
Kimi hated it, and and his trainer Mark Arnold would be panicking on a weekend like this, trying to get all the information out, and at the end of a Grand Prix, Kimi would say, I didn't look at it. But then on occasions, you need it. On occasions, he just wants the gap to the car behind, or he wants to know his race position. Something as simple as that. It's quite often not easy to know where your race position is, and of course you can tell them on the radio, but on certain occasions, particularly on a busy circuit, short lap like this, you want to minimise radio traffic. So it's just having that information that if the driver has a moment along that straight, wants to glance up, it's there for him. It's not as necessary as it used to be.
Also, you can tell that they're still using it now, even in 2022, because George Russell a couple of races ago was talking about the bouncing being so bad in Baku that he couldn't read his pit board.
Yeah, very true. Earlier on, we heard Hamilton's team radio. Peter Bonington is working from Mercedes base in Brackley this weekend, so he's doing his usual role as race engineer, but it will be Marcus Dudley who will be on the radio for Hamilton, as he was when Pete Bonington missed a couple of races in America. Was he Miss America and Mexico at the end of 2019, something like that, and Marcus Dudley took over, who famously was once, I think, performance engineer for Jolyon Palmer or something like that in GP2. So a great pedigree for Marcus Dudley.
Not the most accurate usage of the word famously ever, that, Jack, was it?
Lewis Hamilton's race weekend engineer is famously Jolyon Palmer's once.
Right, cars are going out now, red flags come in, and the soft tyres for Leclerc and Sainz, they've gone straight back out. Quite a lot of other drivers going out on medium tyres, and we'll find out whether they're the same ones they were running on. We were not quite at the halfway point, so maybe they feel like doing a few more laps on those original medium tyres. But Leclerc and Sainz for Ferrari going straight out on the softs. Someone said an airport, but I can't find it. I can't find it now. But a lot of people saying Changi. A lot of people saying Singapore is people's favourite airport.
Yeah.
Roxy loves it. I quite liked Hong Kong, and there's a great burger place in LAX, but only at one of the about 20 terminals. Right. Verstappen on circuit now on a set of soft tyres as well, but Leclerc and Sainz are going quickly. Daniel Ricciardo comes across the line, but he's 2.3 seconds off the pace at the moment, and Sainz though comes through the middle sector and is going quicker than Max Verstappen. He's set the fastest middle sector of anyone, but remember that he's on the soft tyres, and this is comparing to Verstappen's lap time on the mediums. Even though Verstappen is now out on the soft tyres too, he's only on an out lap. Leclerc is quicker than Sainz after the middle sector. In fact, Leclerc's 0.3 quicker than Sainz after the middle sector. Sainz was a 10th quicker in sector 1, so it's a net 2/10 advantage at the moment for Charles Leclerc. Here he comes across the line. Does he go quicker than Sainz? He does by 0.4. So 1 minute, well, pretty much half a second actually, half a second quicker. Charles Leclerc, a 1 minute 6.650, half a second quicker than Sainz, who's on a 1 minute 7.149. And Max Verstappen is just coming around the last 2 corners now and about to start his flying lap. Really gives himself plenty of space. And that reminds me, we had a big mess in qualifying, didn't we, last year at those last couple of corners? Everybody trying to get some traffic. But we'll watch Verstappen's lap with 29 minutes exactly left on the clock. He swings it into the right-hander of turn 1 and then starts the climb up the hill towards turn 3.
I actually wonder if there might be question marks over whether Max Verstappen held up Daniel Ricciardo there. Daniel Ricciardo on a flying lap. Max Verstappen just preparing himself. And for 3 or 4 corners, he was in front of him. I'm not sure it held him up too much, but I wonder if that'll be looked at. But Verstappen's on his way. 0.3 up after the first sector on those soft tyres. So only 3 drivers so far moving on to the softest tyre, the red-walled soft tyre. 2 Ferraris and Max Verstappen. Verstappen so far going quickest. He's coming through the middle sector now. The first sector was quicker than anyone. The second sector also gone purple, fastest of all. He's now into the final sector of this lap. The last few corners coming down through the left-hander, through the 2 right-handers and back onto the start-finish straight, and Verstappen goes quickest. Goes quickest with a 1:06.3. Very good lap from Max Verstappen.
Yep, 0.3 quicker than Charles Leclerc, 0.8 quicker than Carlos Sainz. Russell across the line in the Mercedes. He's still on the medium tyre. It's only Verstappen, Leclerc and Sainz who've gone onto the softs. Russell goes 5th quickest in the Mercedes, a 1 minute 7.8. 1.5 seconds away, but it is Verstappen who goes to the top of the times. Perez still in the pits. It sounded like they had quite major changes that Perez wanted to make, because he was talking about going in the other direction. It wasn't just a bit more wing, please. It was it sounded like a fairly fundamental change that Perez needed to make, so he might be in the pits for a little bit of time. Alonso goes 4th fastest again in the Alpine. Again, medium tyres, but fastest of the medium runners. Kevin Magnussen, who quite often goes blisteringly here, did a superb lap for 8th place in 2018, I want to say, in the Haas, but then I think had a gearbox penalty or something, but it shuffled him back down the order. But it was a magnificent lap. In fact, I think F1 YouTube might have done a back-to-back comparison with Magnussen's lap, now I think about it. But he is 5th quickest, Russell 6th, Schumacher 7th, Ocon 8th, Tsunoda 9th, Stroll 10th. Andrew Benson?
I have some news.
Oh.
The F1 Commission met today, and there have been some outcomes. First one is that the cost cap, because of inflation, has increased by 3.1%.
Okay.
And will be compounded from year to year.
Compound interest?
Yep. They've not written it very clearly, but that's what it means. And the technical directive that people may have heard about to do with floor flexibility that was due to come into place in France, i.e. at the next race. This is all to do with bouncing and measuring the amount of bouncing that's permitted. And there was a new development on that at Silverstone, where it's transpired that the FIA has discovered that some teams are playing with the flexibility of their floors to allow their cars to run lower than they should be allowed to. That's now been delayed until the Belgian Grand Prix. Those are the 2 key things. There's a bit of faff about the power unit being close to finalisation of the 2026 rules. But those are the key things.
Interesting. I mean, why is it that whenever we get an announcement there's going to be a change or a technical directive, it almost seems like that announcement's a little bit premature, because then we have to backtrack and delay it a little bit because we found some unintended consequences.
Everything's delayed all the time, isn't it? What was that test? Do you remember the test for the bendy rear wing? Didn't that get delayed about 10 races or something?
Well, yeah.
We'll do it the next race.
Well, in that case, and in this case, it's because basically what happened was that Ferrari and Red Bull have said, we don't like this. This isn't fair. And that's because, by the way, Mercedes think that Ferrari and Red Bull are the ones who are exploiting that rule on floor flexibility. There's no confirmation of that, but it is Mercedes' belief. They've been pretty clear about that. So they pushed back against it, and there's obviously been a discussion in the F1 Commission meeting to give, which the conclusion of which has been to give the teams a bit more time to adjust their cars to it.
It's actually very similar to that sort of bendy, in inverted commas, bendy rear wing saga, isn't it? There's no suggestion that any car is currently running illegally because they pass all of the static load tests. So the way the FIA currently measure the flexibility of floors is in two very specific locations, and all cars pass that. They have to be scrutineered and allowed onto the racetrack. The suggestion is that there are other areas of that floor that out on the track in dynamic conditions are flexing more than they, the rules intended you to be allowed to make. So they're talking about tightening up the testing procedure to kind of clamp down that in pretty much the same way they did with the rear wing. So there's no suggestion anyone is running an illegal car right now. It's just different interpretations of a rule and really pushing the boundaries to, and maybe even into grey areas beyond.
If you want a mid-session sync, we've got 23 minutes and 53, 52, 51, 50 seconds left on the clock. Valtteri Bottas has just finished a lap and gone 5th fastest, 1.2 seconds back from Verstappen, but he is on the soft tyre, Bottas, whereas all those around him are still on the medium tyres. Russell's in the pits, Vettel's in the pits, Hamilton's in the pits, Perez in the pits, Ricciardo in the pits, and Norris out of the session. Russell, in fact, has just returned to the pit lane now in the Mercedes with less than 24 minutes to go. But I guess it's one of those, actually, if you're doing a sort of lower fuel soft tyre run, you don't actually need as long necessarily to get a few laps in on the soft tyres, because it just literally takes less time to do the laps. Just 66 seconds here. It'll probably go down to 65 or maybe even 64 by the time the race gets by the time we're at qualifying anyway.
Yeah, that's right. The bulk of the work has to be around race preparation, because just from literally a logistical point of view, that takes longer to do. You've got to do more laps to work out how your degradation is on higher fuel, and how as that fuel comes down it changes the characteristics of the car. So yeah, towards the end of the session we'll certainly see people switching to that soft tyre. We've had the two Ferraris and I think both Red Bulls so far, or just one Red Bull so far, onto the softs, but everyone will suddenly make their way as the clock starts ticking down. I feel like we should just very quickly clarify what that flexi floor thing was about. And the idea, in very simple terms, is that because these 2022 cars are, the way to get performance out of them has always been to run them as low as possible. But of course, when you do that, the plank, the bottom of the floor, scrapes along the tarmac, it wears away, and you risk wearing it away too much. So the idea is somebody's come up with a way of making that plank or that bottom of the floor more flexible, so that when the car runs low and the aerodynamics push it into the tarmac, the sort of floor flexes to allow it to run even lower without getting the same sort of wear rate that you would otherwise do if it was as stiff as it perhaps should be.
Red flag, 21 minutes and 50 seconds to go. Red flag. Can't see anyone stopped on circuit at the moment, so maybe a bit of curb up somewhere or something like that, potentially, or actually there's a lot of it looks like there's some fans in the grandstand moving to sort of the turn 7 exit, but they might just be walking around. It's difficult to know, but there is a red flag out. Okay, there's a tiny bit of something on the track. Here's Bottas's radio.
Maybe there's a bit of debris exit of turn 6.
Okay, copy.
Could be that.
Copy.
It's it looks about the size and shape of a litter picker.
Or a windscreen wiper.
Yeah, exactly. It's something like that in the middle of turns 6 and 7. So the red flag is out, a marshal will go get it, and then we'll be back underway. So with the floor flexing, and forgive me if I'm throwing you under the bus here, but hopefully the bus has got a flexi floor and it'll drive straight over you. But is the plank? Is the theory the plank stays solid and like the edges kind of come down a bit more like a skirt, or is it that the sides stay solid and the middle plank bit goes up?
Yeah, we're talking about the central section of the underside of the car. There's currently a static load test where the FIA push up with almost a hydraulic jack from the underneath in 2 specific points that are located, that are specified in the regulations, and the allowable amount of flex is very small. It's like 1 millimetre at the front and 2 millimetres, I think, further back. The suggestion is that way further back, but those 2 points, by the way, are very far forward in that plank. At the rear of the car, where it comes down most under load, under high speed, there is no measurement. There's nothing happens in terms of the measuring process at that point. So the idea is that as that car comes down under load, the first piece to hit the floor would be that plank. It would be the central section of the car. It's that's allowing, or in some teams is supposedly allowing itself to flex and almost bend upwards, if you like, just to minimise the amount of wear that the plank will then suffer, because if you get too much of that, you will be deemed illegal at the end of the Grand Prix.
Like Michael Schumacher in the 1994 Belgian Grand Prix.
There you go.
So what's happened here is that with the red flag is in between the curb and the green sort of concretey bit, there's like a rubber, there's a gap, and then there's like a rubber filler thing, basically, a bit like on your shower, a sort of rubber sealant,
silicone sealant.
Yeah, exactly. That is quite thick and has just been sort of pulled up on the exit of the curbs from the cars running over it, and so the marshals are now having to run along and pull up tape as if they've put tape down on a floor to do some decorating, and they're pulling it all up along
it's a bit like when you get a little bit of thread stuck out your jumper and you think, pull that out, and he's pulled it, and he's still pulling
it now,
and he might have to go around the entire lap here to actually get all of that out, because it's just still coming. It's one of those jobs he wishes he hadn't started. He should have taken the scissors to it.
exactly. So quite a lot of pulling going on there. Both Duncan and JJ have given a shout out for the old Hong Kong airport, which you used to fly.
Did you ever fly into that?
No, before my time. Did you? Have you both?
Yeah, terrifying.
Yeah, it was pretty sketchy, that approach.
I've watched videos on YouTube because that's the kind of person I am.
Like flying over Kowloon, and you were not far above people's laundry on the roofs of
was it coming in over Kowloon? Was it?
You could look out your window from the plane and almost see into people's offices as you come in on the approach.
Yeah, remarkable. So yes, a lot of people saying that was their favourite, but not for the in-airport amenities, but just for the
adrenaline rush
approach. Yeah, exactly. 17 minutes and 52 seconds on the clock. The order is Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz. They've all done a lap on the soft tyres. Magnussen is now 4th quickest. He improved actually just before the red flag came out. Bottas is 5th on the softs. Everybody else is on the mediums, which is Alonso 6th, Tsunoda 7th, Russell 8th, Schumacher 9th, Vettel 10th. Ocon, Gasly, Stroll, Hamilton, Perez, the top 15, and then Joe, Ricciardo, Albon, Latifi, the 19 drivers, because Lando Norris has come to a stop.
That was way too close. I don't understand what he was doing there.
Yeah, agreed.
Verstappen, a bit of team radio. He didn't really seem anywhere near the Ferrari of Sainz. Sometimes we get team radio and a replay, and you end up pretty convinced that that's not what that team radio was from, and that's what I feel a little bit there, because nothing really happened.
It wasn't particularly close. It was Max Verstappen coming up the hill towards turn 3, and the Ferrari sort of turning in as he normally would, but probably not realising Max was there. But they weren't close, like you say. A little bit of nothing.
Norris's car is back. They are the mechanics are just pushing it down the pit lane now. It's back towards the garage. This red flag gap has given them the time to do that, although it says the timing screen is the track, but we're still under red flag conditions, aren't we? Yeah, the session hasn't started again, but we haven't had a time for it to restart just yet. But Norris has been returned to the pit lane, or at least his car has. I think he made it back a little bit earlier on, but Norris then back in the pit lane. Whether they can, I'd be surprised if they can get that out before the end of the session. They'll need to diagnose what the problem is first of all.
We've got a green light about to happen now, according to the timing screens. Any second now.
Yeah, there it goes. Green light. Pit lane open. So
that gives 15 minutes only for the people that haven't yet run soft tyres, and I still think that's perfectly okay. But any more of these stoppages, and perhaps that was prudent on Red Bull and Ferrari's part to get that early soft tyre run done, just in case of things like this. But any more stoppages would start to significantly eat into the time that people have left to get ready for qualifying.
So, sound you can hear is Sergio Perez, who is making his way out on circuit for the first time on these soft tyres. Came into the pits and had quite a long setup change. And we'll see now what the Red Bull driver can do. Hamilton out there as well on the soft tyres. Zhou has gone out on the soft tyres. Gasly has just left the pits on the soft tyres also. So we will see these lap times coming in the second half of this session. Well, the final quarter of this session, with 15 minutes and 3, 2, 1, 0 seconds on the clock. Hamilton down into the right-hander of turn 4 and makes his way past the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly. So this will be an interesting thing to watch, Hamilton's lap time. Verstappen's just about to depart on his set of tyres, on his soft set that have a few laps on them already, and makes his way onto the track now. But Hamilton around the final corner, well, he's just slowing down in between the final couple of corners in order to get himself a bit of a gap to Pierre Gasly, who's back ahead of Hamilton now by the looks of things. So those two swapping places as Gasly comes out across the line and starts his flying lap on the charge up towards the right-hander of turn 1, and Hamilton starts his 2. Perez has done a first sector that is 3 tenths slower, almost 3.5 tenths to be honest, slower than Max Verstappen has managed, and that's just one corner, the first sector here in Austria. I think it's last time we were here, I think it was Alonso would always just be, no, I think it was Ricciardo actually. That was it. Ricciardo was always mega in sector 1, which was only that one corner, and then really far off Norris over the rest of the lap. But for some reason he kept sort of going the purple in sector 1. Perez is a second down, dips a couple of wheels into the gravel on the exit of turn 7, the right-hand kink at 8, and now into the final couple of corners. This is maybe going to put him kind of in the top 6 or 7 here for Perez. Out across the line now, and he does go over to 4th place then, so he pretty much matches Verstappen in the final sector. Hamilton is 6 tenths down after the middle sector, so he could be going quicker than Perez here. Here comes the British driver over the curbs into turn 10, out across the line, and Hamilton does go 3rd quickest, quicker than Perez by 3 tenths of a second, but 6 tenths away from what Max Verstappen has managed. Verstappen has just done an install lap, that's all. So he came back into the pits, and so he is still at the top of the times. Leclerc is on an out lap. We'll see whether he returns straight back to the pit lane. Carlos Sainz is still in the pits in the other Ferrari. Well, Perez now, I'm sure, will do a cool down and go again. Albon goes 9th.
With no rear wing gurney, just to check if that solves the problem.
So no gurney flap on the rear wing for Daniel Ricciardo to check if that solves the problem.
Yeah, that'll be the oscillating DRS problem, presumably.
Yeah, it could well be. The gurney flap is a sort of tiny right-angled section of carbon fibre that just gives you a sort of 10 mil, sometimes less than that, 5 mil flick up on the trailing edge of the rear wing, and it's a sort of quick and easy way of adjusting and trimming downforce levels. So they'll pop that on just to see how it works.
That was, I'd say, maybe worse.
Copy, Daniel. So we'll box this lap.
Yeah, felt like it started doing it at lower speeds.
So there you go, it didn't work.
Yeah.
So that sounds like exactly what you were saying, Andrew. It was to sort of try and see if they can alleviate the oscillating rear wing, the DRS flap, and Daniel's comment suggesting that not working.
Apparently the gurney flap, I think I might have told this before on air actually, but apparently it's like insanely effective for what it is. Like because you're right at that final, because again there's a woman who operates replays on Formula E who used to be an aerodynamicist for Force India, and then sort of stopped doing it and now does this anyway. And she's like, because it's at that final point, the tiniest adjustment you make there has such a huge adjustment or such a huge impact over the downforce levels.
Well, downforce, but also with minimal drag penalty. It's one of the best ways of trimming your downforce without taking a drag penalty or a significant drag penalty as a result. All downforce comes with some sort of penalty. But also on the rear wing, a wing that's not anywhere near as quickly as adjustable as the front wing is. You can't trim it in the same way you can the front wing. A gurney flap on the rear wing is actually, because they're only stuck on, believe it or not, with double-sided tape.
Really?
Of all places. Very, very good, very strong double-sided tape. But it's a very quick and easy way to trim that.
A lot of people now getting in touch about the old Hong Kong. Colin saying we had flight deck seats on an Airbus 340 into Kai Tak. Simply brilliant, and manual controls from the pilots. Johnny said my uncle was invited to sit in the jump seat for the landing into Hong Kong. He was a World War II Spitfire pilot, but even he was impressed with the piloting skills of threading these huge planes through the buildings. Wow.
Yeah, amazing.
This is where we need Ted Kravitz, because he's a real plane. He's a plane man, isn't he?
He's a super geek.
He's not a plane man, but he's a man who likes planes.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Here's Verstappen's radio. Oh dear. Real mess at the final couple of corners. I think that might have even been the two Alfa Romeos nearly coming together. Yeah, Bottas was having to take evasive action because Joe was on the apex at turn 9. And yeah, we had a lot of carnage last year, didn't we? Because people wanted the slipstream here, didn't they? Because
it's also a very short circuit, so you get bunched up, and yeah, you know, this is something to watch out for in qualifying. There's just not enough space around the track for 20 cars in the early part of qualifying when they all want to be on the same bit of tarmac.
Talking of Alfa Romeo, by the way, have you mentioned Bottas' engine penalty?
I haven't. Would you like to?
He has an engine penalty.
Does he?
He's got a whole new engine, internal combustion engine, turbo, MGUH and MGUK. So he's now the second Ferrari engine driver to take a full grid penalty after Leclerc in Canada.
Am I right in thinking that this is still of the same spec that they had the problems with on Leclerc's car a few races ago? They haven't found an actual fix.
So they introduced a second spec around Miami time.
Yeah.
And that's the engine that's got the problems. Yeah.
So they're still kind of... They haven't fixed the problem.
So you're putting new ones in the pool, but they're still the ones with a potential issue.
Exactly, yeah. So this could come back to bite them later on in the year. They need to find a fix, but they can't do it that quickly. I mean, that was the problem. The problems that happened earlier on, the races have come thick and fast since then. They haven't had a time to do a full, to find a full, proper long-term fix for it.
8.5 minutes to go. Kevin Magnussen has gone 5th quickest. Again, 6 tenths away from Verstappen, so Magnussen absolutely on it this weekend. Sainz is 7 tenths away from Verstappen and 4 tenths away from his teammate Leclerc. Alonso comes across the line now, still running on the medium tyres, Fernando Alonso. So no soft running for the Spaniard. His teammate Ocon is doing the same. So both Alpines saving or keeping a set of soft tyres in this session, or rather not using them. Sainz comes through sector 1. He's on another push lap, 16.9 in the first sector, which is 3 tenths slower than Verstappen. It's about what he's been doing the whole of the session so far. Perez returns to the pits. Verstappen on that last lap did a 1 minute 11.9. So I think they're straight into some long runs for Verstappen, unless he got some traffic on that last lap. But that would explain why he did that sort of install lap as well, because that's what you tend to do at the start of a long run. And through the first sector, he's about a second away through sector 1. So I would suggest that Verstappen is straight onto a long run, while Leclerc is in the pits and Sainz is out doing quick laps. Verstappen is getting straight into a long run on the soft tyres with 7 minutes and 5 seconds on the clock. What is Sainz up to after the middle sector? He has done a 29.9. He's half a second away in the middle sector, so he comes into the pits because he was not improving by any stretch of the imagination on that lap, Carlos Sainz. Just getting a replay of Verstappen. I think getting some more traffic coming into the final couple of corners. And he's up behind Hamilton.
Did you see that, Aston?
Yep, reported it.
He's up behind Vettel coming into the final couple of corners. I apologise. So Vettel holding up Verstappen. I think this is why we're seeing so much traffic issues for Verstappen. It's because I think he's basically the only driver out there doing a long run. Everybody else is looking for gaps in traffic and whatever, and Verstappen's just trying to pound round and getting held up all the time.
It shows a huge amount of confidence in that one soft tyre quick one, 1 lap run that they did earlier on, which of course still keeps him top of the timesheet. So he's now moved on to race preparation, so perhaps an ominous sign for everybody else.
Mick Schumacher is improving on this lap. He's done a personal best in the first sector. His middle sector's about 8 tenths, 7 tenths away from what Verstappen has managed, so might be able to manage an improvement here for Schumacher as he comes. He's backed off. He's backed off after the middle sector. Just having a look at Valtteri Bottas, having a very odd trip into the gravel there, because I'm not sure he was pushing at all. Was he pushing? We're on board with him now. maybe he was pushing, but he was just a little bit wide of the apex and then opened up the steering and ended up dipping a wheel into the gravel. It didn't feel like a push lap, honestly, for Bottas, but went through the gravel nevertheless.
He did. He's been through that gravel trap before, hasn't he? He went through that in the Mercedes, do you remember? And actually shortly after, on Google Maps, somebody put in Valtteri Bottas gardening services as he'd ploughed through the grass and almost like a lawnmower left a trail behind him.
And that was what lost Hamilton pole.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, because the yellow flag was out, wasn't it?
That's right.
But Bottas going through the gravel. Out on track goes Daniel Ricciardo. Looked like a brand new set of mediums there for Daniel Ricciardo as he rejoins the fray. McLaren 19th and 20th with Ricciardo and Norris. Obviously Norris retired after 14 laps of this session. Ricciardo waiting at the pit lane exit for a gap in the traffic. So we'll see what he can do and whether they've solved the problem.
A lot of responsibility now on Daniel Ricciardo's shoulders here, not only to get himself into a good place, but he's doing the work for the team here. He's doing all the learning that McLaren are going to get out of this morning's session, really. So he's having to pound around and put the laps in, now on the medium tyres, looking back towards the race after doing his qualifying runs. But all hope, in terms of data collection, rests on Daniel Ricciardo's shoulders.
4 minutes to go. I'm going to tell this story. It's completely unrelated to anything. But it's from Paul, who's on holiday in damp northern Scotland. Is it raining up in Scotland?
Of course it is.
It's beautiful. Beautiful day in the rest of England. Right, so he flying into Taipei, which is Taiwan, in the late 80s, from Hong Kong with British Airways. Here's Ricciardo's radio.
Yeah, it seemed better.
Okay, so he's not doing it anymore, Daniel?
Yeah, I couldn't see it doing it. I think it was better.
Copy.
So it was definitely better. I think it's okay, but it was definitely better.
So Ricciardo's saying it was definitely better, and he thinks it might not be happening at all. So we'll keep an eye on that. Really quickly, this story, because it's great. The pilot flying in the late 80s into Taiwan said he never had 100% faith in air traffic control, so he always asked for and got permission to land, and then would fly the approach, and then go around, and then do the real landing, because the first run was to ensure there was no livestock or random machinery on the runway, because that's what he'd encountered in the past. So he used to go in, do like a pretend landing, go up, do a go around, and then come in again, knowing that the track was clear.
What, and the pilot told the passengers that this is what he was doing?
Idiot! Can't look in their mirror.
Gasly fuming at a Ferrari there. Lewis Hamilton went straight on at turn 1. This was the 80s, and it said he was allowed in the cockpit for the landing. So I don't think he's going, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be doing a go around in case there's some sheep. I don't think it was one of those, but interesting stuff. So Gasly getting a bit of traffic. Hamilton went on at the first corner. Leclerc's on a push lap here. Was 16.8 in the first sector, so he's almost 3 tenths down on Verstappen in sector 1. Now through the right-hander of turn 2. 2 wheels up on the yellow sausage curb on the exit of that right-hander at turn 3. Sorry, my apologies. Now he's coming down in towards turn 4 as the track drops away, and then the corner opens up and then tightens a little on the exit, and Leclerc right up to the gravel on the exit. Now he's coming into the quick double left-hander at turn 6, then into turn 7, not troubling the apex at turn 6, and he's almost half a second down on Verstappen, not really troubling the apex at 7 either. And now just 2 more corners to go, and after improving in sector 1, he is not improving after the next couple of corners. Final corner at turn 10, out across the line, keeps 2 wheels within the white line, and he does improve in the end. The fastest final sector of anyone for Leclerc, and just 2 tenths away from Verstappen. So, I mean, it's a little more encouraging for Ferrari, but Verstappen hasn't been doing quick laps for half an hour now.
No, and with only a minute left to go in this session, there's no more time now to start tweaking things and to making adjustments. Certainly not that you can go back out and test, because the next time these cars will be on track will be qualifying. So Verstappen looking like the class of the field so far, managing to put plenty of time into race preparation, seemingly very comfortable with his qualifying lap, out front with a 106.3, and as you just heard there, Leclerc, the closest man to him, 2 tenths back.
And you make a good point. I haven't even said this, actually. Qualifying is this afternoon.
Yeah.
And I hadn't actually really considered that in the context of Verstappen's lapping and stuff like that. that qualifying is this afternoon. It's a sprint weekend, so then we have free practice 2 tomorrow morning, and then the sprint race tomorrow afternoon. So it makes sense why we're sort of seeing this focusing on soft tyre running, but they're not actually running it too dissimilar to the free practice 1 normally. Honestly, it doesn't seem. But
it's just that you can't waste time. You have to be on circuit, don't you, for the entirety of the hour, or as best you can, and that's why it was such a blow to Lando Norris to miss out on so much of this session.
Yeah, that's very true. Checker flag is out then, so that makes. So I am more curious now about the Alpines just running mediums.
Yeah,
for the whole session.
That is strange, because both cars did it.
Yeah.
Which is very odd. Either they're thinking ahead to the race, wondering whether they can really say whether the softs will come into play on Sunday.
But if you were doing a medium looking ahead to the race, why would Alonso wouldn't just be 8/10 off Verstappen?
It's a strange one. I don't understand that myself. I'm not sure.
Unless they want more softs.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm thinking of, saving tyres. But yeah,
so that they can do 2 runs in Q3 if they get there, or 2 runs in Q2, or I don't know.
It does mean you're going in somewhat blind, but they'll have a good understanding of what the difference is on their car between a medium and a soft tyre. Of course, it's never quite the same at every circuit. In my mind, you'd always want to just get out on them for a lap or so, but they haven't done that. We'll find out this afternoon or not whether it worked.
So, checker flag is out. Session is over. Max Verstappen is quickest, a 1 minute 6.302. Couple of tenths quicker than Charles Leclerc. George Russell jumped up in the end to 3rd quickest on the medium tyre, 4 tenths away from Verstappen. So Russell's lap time on the mediums into 3rd place. Perez 4th, Hamilton 5th. Magnussen, Sainz, Alonso, Schumacher and Tsunoda, the top 10. Stroll, Ocon, Vettel, Bottas, Albon, the top 15. Gasly, Ricciardo, Zhou and Latifi, the 19 drivers to set relatively competitive lap times. Lando Norris did not, due to the McLaren breaking down after 14 laps.
It's an impressive lap from Russell on the medium tyre.
Yeah.
4 tenths off. 4 tenths off Max Verstappen, that is, the class of the field so far, on a tyre that in theory should be at least half a second, 6 or 7 tenths, and that's without the difference between their 2 cars. So that's a good lap.
Yeah, unless there's I've been shown 2 things now with that lap time from Russell. It says he's on the mediums, and the graphics just said he was set that lap on the mediums, but it then just changed to say he did it on the soft. So,
okay.
Well, and Hamilton is definitely out on the medium tyres, so maybe there's a discrepancy there. This is where we have to try and look with our eyes, but we'll see if he ends up doing practice start. Yeah,
it said his fastest lap was set on the medium, but that's a blisteringly fast lap.
And it would have also meant he would have put the softs on for the second half of the session, then come in and put mediums on at the end. So I'm not sure I buy that from Russell.
Yeah,
but even on the softs, it's fairly competitive, and it's ahead of Sergio Perez. So maybe some sort of hope for Mercedes there. Andrew Benson, your thoughts from what we've just witnessed over the last hour?
Well, I'm just waiting for. I'm just waiting for Mercedes to reply about that. About that lap time. He did not set that time on the soft tyre. He set it on the medium tyre. He set it on the soft tyre.
Okay, fine.
The reason he's got mediums on his display now is he's put them on for the practice starts at the end of the session.
Okay, great.
So my takeout from that is Mark was right. Red Bull looked very fast. Secondly, Sainz is a long way off Leclerc, half a second, and he was on both sets of tyres, the medium and the soft. And another impressive performance from Russell, which I think is encouraging for Mercedes on a track where they didn't expect to be looking that competitive. Okay, 4 tenths is a decent gap, but bearing in mind that A, they weren't expected to be competitive here, and secondly, Mercedes are struggling on 1 lap at the moment because they're struggling to get tyre temperature, and they're much more competitive over a race distance. So maybe Mercedes will be in the frame again in Austria. Let's see.
Really good stuff from the Haas car. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Both Haas's in really good positions. Magnussen up in P5, and even Mick Schumacher well inside the top 10 in P9 again. So good stuff from them.
It was a freight flight, apparently, from Hong Kong to Taiwan. So yeah, no mention of his tactics to the self-loading freight, says Paul. It was cockpit chat only, and Cockpit Chat Only, that's the title of a podcast.
I was just going to say that's a
really?
podcast.
That's a podcast waiting to happen. And if that does exist, I'm going to start listening to aeroplane podcasts. So Max Verstappen ends the session quickest. Qualifying is coming up next, 2.5 hours time. Make sure you join us here on the BBC Sport website for that, because the battle for the pole position and the front of the grid in the sprint race looks like it'll be another fight between Verstappen and Leclerc. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. We'll be back in 2.5 hours for qualifying for the Austrian Grand Prix. We'll see you then.